Welcome to Table Talk, everyone. Whether you're here with us on Zoom, Facebook Live, or Clubhouse. My name is Andy Engel. I'm Senior Programmer at Reimagine. For anyone who needs a visual description, I'm a white cisgender male, glasses, salt and pepper hair. I have a bright orange background. Thank you for joining the first of 3 table talks by and for LGBTQ+ communities. Our topic tonight is about aging and specifically about some of the most visionary housing initiatives for older adults who identify as LGBTQ and same gender loving. SGL, by the way, is a preferred term among many Black folks. More on that soon. Table Talk was born last summer as part of Reimagine's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative. That's JEDI for short. And tonight, 1 year later, we remember George Floyd. Last summer, in order to put ideas about justice and inclusion into practice, my colleague Stephanie Rivers, who I think is on this call, came up with the concept of Table Talk, an honest, lively, and unscripted conversation by and for underrepresented communities. At the same time, everyone is invited to these spaces to witness, learn, and listen. The central question that grounds Table Talk is, what does it mean to live and die well, specifically among groups that have been historically marginalized, who experience disproportionate obstacles to healthy living and dignified dying? Our vision for Table Talk is that it becomes a regular booster shot, if you will, of knowledge, empathy, and cultural humility. While Stephanie was leading the vision for the African American pilot series last fall, I supported her as a producer. She encouraged me, the gay guy on Reimagine's programming team, to develop this LGBTQ+ series. Along the way, I had the benefit of observing Asian American Table Talks led by Holly Chan and Elizabeth Wong, who were supported by Derek Cosberg and Zubin Desai, who is helping out on this call. Hello, Zubin. The joy in working on this LGBTQ+ series, a warm and yummy alphabet soup, is to witness all the intersecting identities that feed into queer and same gender loving lives. It's obvious that this series is timed for Pride Month, but perhaps you don't know that we're approaching another significant anniversary. On June 5th, 1981, the Centers for Disease Control released an article that reported on the first 5 cases of what later became known as AIDS. That was 40 years ago. I want to acknowledge that those currently working in the end-of-life space are standing on the shoulders of LGBTQ+ community members who had no choice but to step up as DIY caregivers when institutions did not offer support due to homophobia, fear, and stigma. These table talks are a celebration of those who came before us. Next slide, please, Zubin. For those who wish, click on the CC icon to get a live transcript of what's being said tonight, and feel free to send a note in the chat to a Reimagine team member if you have any questions about Zoom. I think the majority of us are zooming in from the United States, also known as Turtle Island by Native Americans and their allies. Please join me in acknowledging Indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This land acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of colonialism. I'm in Lenapehoking, also known as New York City. Tell us where you are. If you are curious about the Indigenous territory where you're located, check out the link in the chat. And if Zubin, you could do this for me, that would be great. It's native-land.ca. And finally, if you have to drop off at any time during this presentation, please know that we will be sending out a recording in an email to all those who registered. Next slide, please. I want to thank all of our 2021 sponsors for Reimagine. We cannot do this work without your support. And I want to particularly highlight the John and Wynonna Harmon Foundation for their support of Reimagine's JEDI initiative, which makes Table Talk possible. And I also want to thank the primary co-host of this series, SAGE, an organization that collaborated with Reimagine on its in-person festival back in 2018. They serve LGBTQ plus older adults across the US and Puerto Rico. I also want to quickly acknowledge and thank MK Serwick, the comic nurse, a leader in the field of graphic medicine who is on this call. You can't see her, but she will be drawing some comics based on this conversation, but we hope to be sharing these out in the future. And now I'm going to launch a quick poll to get us warmed up. Here we go. Hope you can all see that. Do you feel comfortable or confident having conversations with loved ones about what it means to live and die well? Thank you. Thank you so much. And we would love to hear more from you after the event about your experience. So please stick around for the concluding poll at the end. We can stop sharing slides now, Zubin. And now it's my opportunity to introduce Sydney Kopp-Richardson, who will facilitate this conversation. Sydney is the director of SAGE's National LGBT Elder Housing Initiative. She is a champion of human rights, whether it's for queer folks in general, older adults, people involved in the justice system, or people living with mental health challenges. When I asked Sydney to take on this role, it was because she has the big picture from where she sits. Sydney told me earlier that she wants her colleagues, the ones working on the ground, who she calls the real stars of tonight's program, to inform and direct this conversation. This is an attribute of a mensch, a decent human being like Sydney who brings light by letting others shine. Sydney, take it away.
Thank you so much, Andy. That is so beautiful. I appreciate that. So thank you to Andy, to the Table Talks crew. I'm really thrilled to be here with folks this evening and so grateful for your work in this space. And I also really do want to lift up here the importance of honoring the life and unjust death of George Floyd tonight, as I know it is heavy on our hearts today. I'm going to briefly introduce each of our amazing guests, and they'll have an opportunity to share more with you about their work in the conversation. These are people I have such tremendous reverence for, and all of them are people who have helped me personally and professionally and truly as a human in this world and in these conversations and in this work. So we have Dr. Imani Woody, President and CEO of Mary's House, Inc. in Washington, D.C. We have Jacqueline Boyd, board co-chair of One Roof Chicago and founder of the Care Plan in Chicago. And we have Dr. Karen Scoltetti, executive director of Open House in San Francisco. And I would be remiss not to mention this is Karen's last week with Open House as she transitions to next steps. And I know we'll continue to do truly love-driven, inspiring, and accountable work in this sphere, in her family's world and in our world. And I want to honor how much you have impacted me as well, Karen. So before we dive deep into these conversations, I want our guests to think a little bit about what we're bringing to this space. So when we think about what it means to be sitting with one another at this virtual table, I want to ask everyone, the three people in this conversation, what table are you sitting at? And what can you share personally about why you are doing this work? So I don't know if Dr. Imani, would you like to start?
Of course. Andy, thank you so much. You and your team at Reimagine. I'm so grateful to be here and be on this stage with these remarkable people. So I'm sitting at, I feel, Sydney, I'm sitting at 20 million tables, but I'm going to pick two, right? So I'm sitting at the advocate table today. This weekend, Memorial Day weekend, is the anniversary of my mother's death. And she died, the death certificate said she died of pneumonia, but truly she got sick. And we were on a ride with my dad just through the city. We were looking to buy a home. And my mother got really ill. My pop took her to a hospital, and the hospital did not accept Black people at that time. So we had to go find the Negro hospital. This is Washington, D.C. in the 60s, 63. And we took her to the D.C. General Hospital, which was one of two hospitals for Black folks. And the medical personnel was white and thought she was having DT. She didn't drink, but they let her stay in the hall, and she died. All right. So that's my foray into being an advocate. You know, everyone should have equal access to healthcare early on. You know, I'm thinking about that, and equal access to housing. And reluctantly today, not all days, but only today, I'm sitting at the elders table. I had to go and get my hair colored, right? Because ageism is such a beast, right? So today I'm sitting at the elders table, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing that personal connection to this work. How about Jacqueline? How about Jacqueline?
How about Jacqueline comes off mute? Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm actually literally sitting at my parents' dining room table in the home that I grew up in, and I metaphorically am sitting at the table of hope and healing, because after the year that we've all had, preceded by, for especially folks of color and LGBTQ folks, years of marginalization, pain, trauma, a lot of what's come to the surface in our society, I'm interested in doing the work of healing, of allowing spaces for conversations like these around race and gender and sexual orientation and other areas of our identities that we may need healing around from our lived experiences. So that's the metaphorical table I'm at. The reason why I do this work is also connected to the literal table I'm at. I started out in health and aging when I was 18 because I really wanted to understand how to care for my loved ones beyond emotional support, how to help if, you know, my mother or father had trouble as they got older, if there were chronic illnesses that needed to be addressed. So I'm at the table of caregiving, loving my family and chosen family, and hope and healing.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And how about Karen? What table are you sitting at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very appropriately in some ways for the conversation tonight, sitting at a table that is some grief and loss, both in preparing to finish up a really incredible time leading Open House as an organization, which has just been a tremendous honor, and I will continue to be a huge fan and support and involved, but a loss and change in who I've been with the organization, and saying goodbye to some of my staff as I've moved across the country. But I'm also in a place of grief and loss. We've lost two LGBTQ community members who were very dear to the Open House family in the last 2 weeks. One was a incredible woman named Felicia Flames, who I highly encourage you to go Google and learn about. She was involved in the Compton's cafeteria riot, which predates Stonewall by a few years in San Francisco. I'm not trying to compete with New York, don't worry. But yeah, an amazing trans woman, activist, veteran, and I had the honor of multiple times getting to introduce her at drag shows with getting to scream Felicia Flames at the top of my lungs, and it was truly the honor of a lifetime. And then last night, we had a gentleman, Herb Jones, I'm gonna say his name, who died rather unexpectedly, who was one of our volunteer receptionists at Open House and a long-term survivor of HIV. And you know, he died in a hospital without biological family around him and without a lot of support. But some of my staff were with him. And, you know, I am holding that you cannot have sadness and grief unless you deeply love and you deeply care. You know, the authentic connection that I feel so deeply to this work and to being in community with people is so alive at the table, because I'm exactly around people I would want to be at a table of grief, people I love and respect and feel authentically connected to, and I'm holding that loss, and that's part of the conversation we're going to have tonight. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you all for sharing such intimate parts of why we're here, why we do this work, and what is happening for you in these moments. You know, speaking of loss and grief, right? LGBTQ and same gender loving elders can experience deep vulnerability. So people might be aging solo, they might be without support from family of origin, from religious institutions, from affirming aging facilities, other support networks. We've seen that exacerbated with COVID in the last year. We see people going back into the closet when they're trying to access support or go into nursing homes, hospice. And we also see gender identities or same-sex partners not honored at funerals. So the issues that come up a lot that we see amongst one another, I think, and in personally in my work with SAGE is, there's this mistrust of healthcare systems and the medical trauma that people carry, the lack of services and the economic disparities that LGBTQ elders and same gender loving elders experience, the legacies of discrimination that Dr. Amani spoke to, and how horrific that impact is on someone's wellness or their ability to die the ways that they wish, right? The ageism mentioned around LGBTQ plus and same gender loving communities and beyond. And I will quote Dr. Woody in a previous conversation, the truth about aging is it can be a beast to get older. So something I'd like for our folks to talk about first is, what are some of the barriers LGBTQ and same gender loving elders face, particularly in dying with dignity and care? Do we have someone that wants to start that off for us?
I think we're all likely to defer to Dr. Woody first. So
No.
anything
I'm
you
going
wanna
to,
say?
Jacqueline, be my guest. You start us off.
Okay. Well, I think there's two main barriers that I see. The first is that we've had too little opportunity to see our elders. And so people don't have the idea that they will age or many models for aging, in part because of ageism as well, right? The LGBTQ plus communities and SGL communities are not immune to ageism and to, having spaces that aren't necessarily friendly or welcoming for older adults. And the other thing that I see as a main barrier is social isolation. When you don't have family of origin, or you're 3 and 4 times less likely to have children, where's that safety net? And even though we really are pioneers around chosen family, there are still limits and still barriers in those personal relationships, unless you have somebody that's really pushing to say, let's age together, let's figure this out together. It tends to stay in the place of idea versus action. And so I think those are two of the main barriers I see that, for many, this is the first generation where aging well, dying well is even an option for LGBTQ plus and SGL folks. And oftentimes people are really struggling with isolation and don't have those solidified networks of support.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Karen, were you get?
Yeah, I mean, I just would add to that on top of that, the traditional, what I would call the traditional systems of care for seniors and for aging are not designed to meet the needs of a whole lot of people, but they're certainly not designed to meet the needs of LGBTQ seniors. Particularly, I want to call out trans seniors in particular. We're not even close to what we need. And what the data shows us is the systems of care, the aging services, the really cool, innovative models that are out there that exist specifically to make sure that you get to age at home and not in a nursing home and not in an assisted living, which, by the way, people tend to not want to age in anyway, but we know have particularly risks for LGBTQ folks. What we see there is there's almost no utilization of those services by LGBTQ seniors, right? That's true in San Francisco, where I joke that, everything is rainbows and sunshine. It's not. But it's true there, and it's even worse in other parts of the country. And so one of the things I get real passionate and crazy about, but I'll contain myself for a moment, is like, we have entire systems of care that we've got to break and fix and start over again, and be really clear these aren't designed and aren't going to serve LGBTQ seniors. And I can get into that, but particularly the ones who are designed for if you get more frail, if you become cognitively impaired, if you have more chronic conditions, those systems of care, when we look, there's almost no utilization by LGBTQ seniors, and that means the systems are broken. So time to break them and make some new fucking ones.
There we go.
There's the first word of the series. Yeah, go ahead.
So like I so agree with Karen and Jacqueline, you know, that the systems are broken. I mean, my folks have both transitioned, and the thing my father said, and my stepmother, who I helped her to transition, don't put me in a nursing home. No one wants to go into a nursing home. And why is that? Because they are broken. I love that, Karen. They are absolutely broken. And for LGBTQ people, it's more than broken, right? You try to bring your whole self, and you can be discriminated against, right? You can there's a couple of court cases out there where people were discriminated against in nursing homes because they were gay. You know, this one quick story I'll share, and all of you know the story, so please pop in if I leave something pertinent out. This woman went to a retirement facility, because she got kicked out of her home by her long-term partner's biological family, and a agency found her a place to stay. It was a kind of a religious kind of place, and found her. She loved it. She put a picture up of her son, and a resident said, "Oh my gosh, you and your husband must be so proud of him." And she said, "Oh yeah, me and my wife are very proud of him." And from there, things went from sugar to not sugar. And she was harassed by the residents, harassed and physically harassed. And the staff did not take up for her. And so the case went to court. I think it's on appeal now, ladies, right? But that happens over and over again. So in addition to, I think Jacqueline brought up the part that folks are going back into the closet because it's freaking hard to be gay and old. Who the hell, right? It's like all your intersectionalities, like being Black, being with a disability, being female, and then being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, same gender loving, and the other part of the alphabet. Good grief. So it's really hard to be old in this society, as somebody mentioned, especially during COVID. It's been highlighted how awful it is to be old. And we haven't really I haven't heard on a mass scale how awful it's been to be old and gay in these spaces. And that makes me think that folks really went back into the closet.
Mm-hmm. People absolutely have. And thank you so much, Dr. Woody, for speaking about Marsha Wetzel. Everybody on here can look up her case. She was represented by Lambda Legal. Yeah, we had the honor of supporting her the last 2 years until she passed away in November. Right. And she's actually her life is very similar to the lives of so many LGBTQ elders of her time, right? She was right around 80 years old. The term gay was not even in common use when she was young. All she knew growing up was that she was different, and she experienced harassment and physical abuse from a really young age, because she grew up in Calumet City, in the south part of Chicago, south suburbs. And that harassment that she experienced in the facility is the untold story of so many LGBTQ plus seniors. Indeed. And I think that is a shared passion of why we do this work, because we know those stories, we see those seniors. I know as an aging services professional, I never met an out LGBTQ senior until I was in year 15 of being in aging services. So it took 15 years for there to be any senior that felt comfortable enough to say, this is my partner, or I'm gay, versus this is my roommate, this is my friend, or, not sharing that information. So thank you, Dr. Woody, for bringing Marsha's spirit and energy into the room.
Thanks for naming her. To me, she's just a pioneer. Just to have a case, just to have someone bring a case to Lambda Legal. Can you imagine, most time? So if one case was brought, I'm thinking there are 100 cases out there that were not brought and people just were not served.
I just also want to say, like, part of, I think too, that's that I just want to do a shout out is, like, when we think about who LGBTQ seniors are, we're talking about incredibly resilient, badass, amazing people who I would not be sitting here. I wouldn't have kids. I wouldn't get to wear a bow tie to work. Like, literally every privilege I have, right, is from my LGBTQ elders. And so there's also a way that senior services in particular has a tendency to be like, oh, seniors, you know, they're isolated, they face challenges. And that's true. Like, there are needs and there are challenges. And we're talking about people who should, I'll wait on my second F word, who absolutely deserve the highest quality, best services, most incredible, like, lifting up and celebrating in their lives, because we need them in our communities, right? We need to be fighting, you know, with them at our side, and to not have them is really, that's a real problem for the whole community, right? It's not just a problem for them. And I just always want to hold that up, because it's easy for people to sort of do these sad sack stories that I think are nonsense. And we designed our own services, right? I mean, we think about what happened with AIDS, we designed our own services. And so these sort of top-down government funded programs, like, of course they're not going to work for a community that's used to being creative and incredible and coming up with what we know will actually work for us. It's a direct conflict, right, from sort of our history and our cultural values.
And it takes such energy, Karen, I so agree. It takes such energy to be resilient. You all on the call, if you're part of my tribe, we know every freaking day, I almost said the F word, every freaking day, it's freaking hard to get up and push through that ageism. Push from the moment I get up and I turn on, you know, you look at your newscasters, you look at an ad, and I'm working in housing, and if you look at who are they advertising for ads, even for retirement, you know, there's a certain person, a certain persona that folks are looking for. They don't seem like they're looking for me. And I'm not talking my race, ethnicity right now. I'm talking about the able-bodiedness. You know, I need to be making those 8,000 steps every day that I don't do, right? Or I need to climb the stairs because, you know, there are not many elevators here. Or I need to, I need to disrupt aging as opposed to working through aging. There's a whole, but that's another thing that we can get into. But there's a gentleman in my I'll call him a constituent, who said that he lost over 100 friends to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, right? So he said, I have friends, but I lost 100 friends. So there's no one in his cohort. And so new friends are great, but those old friends, not to have that. And I forget which one of you ladies mentioned it, but being in social isolation, not having any backup when folks write their wills, we're finding out, or their advanced directives, they're asking the lawyers, can you be my next of kin? Right? It's just amazing. And so, yeah, we've got to fix them, because if I go into a nursing home, it better be right. Because it's gonna be a hard hole to row for them folks. So, you know, we've got to make it right through like Reimagine is bringing it out, and we get to uplift these issues.
So on that note, and we have some questions in the chat, but I would love to hear about, we're talking about invisibility, we're talking about some of the struggles. What are some possibilities, both in LGBTQ housing programs, safe homes, opportunity to facilitate these hard conversations around death and dying and life wishes? What are some opportunities? What are some models regarding housing, or as Karen said, creating new systems of care? What does that mean? What does that look like? What exists, and what are we envisioning? I don't know who to pick first.
I'm happy to volunteer.
Thank you.
Because this is another thread that I think ties all of our work together, is that of innovation, right? We are right now having the honor of supporting and some of us in the room being the first generations to age out right? To be able to say, we are going to make it past 50. We're going to make it to 60 and 70 and 80 and 90 and 100. It doesn't have to look the same way that that the traditional systems look. So that's the space I'm interested in, is innovation. And I think, at least for One Roof Chicago, we're an emerging nonprofit that is focused on building in that support for long, healthy life with chosen family and with people that you care about and authentically care about you, and creating a space that feels like home. Because as Karen said, so many of the institutions are broken, and housing is too. You know, you go into most senior housing and it feels cold, and it feels even less like home than your college dorm room did. So, you know, how can we create home settings where we have chosen family around us, where we have support when and where we need it, but can also claim all parts of our identities and be our authentic selves while having quality of life. So I know that that's something that we all appreciate, is innovation and finding new ways to age rather than just, okay, let me try to fit myself into this system that wasn't built for me.
Great, thank you. Dr. Woody or Karen?
Go ahead, Dr. Woody.
So thanks, Karen. So I'm thinking of two things. So one is housing. I'm building housing. My pop left me a house and I'm building housing. Mary's House for Older Adults is communal housing. It's 15 rooms. We're tearing down the original house, building 15 studios of communal housing so that you can bring your whole self, your fat, tall, gay self, and have a quality of life. So that's one thing. I think communal living is the way to go. So in 1A is the village concept. I don't know if folks on our call know about the village concept, wherein you age in place. Karen was talking about it earlier, but usually this is like a fee for service kind of thing. I'm the president of the village in DC, the Brooklyn Village, and it's intergenerational because we need it, and usually it's not, but it's intergenerational where you pay a certain fee. During COVID, there was a sliding fee or no fee, and volunteers help put that light bulb in, pick up the prescriptions, help you do your laundry, your yard, that kind of thing. So I think, and so that you can stay in your house as long as you can. And it is the tab of this. Some of the monies come from the Department of Aging, which is my second point, is that we have beat down our Department of Aging so it could stand up. So we have an advisory group in our Department of Aging because we needed to say, you don't see us. We are invisible. We're not invisible. We're in Washington, D.C. I think I forget the stats, but we have the largest per capita population of gay folks in the nation. So we're not invisible. You need to do something. And so they have a whole LGBTQ program that they put, they see us. There's a tech program. There's a call-in program that they do. So I think, so this alternative housing, Mary's House for Older Adults, is one way, and making our agencies responsible, being advocates. And not everybody can do that. You can't go, not everybody can testify in front of City Hall, but you surely can make a phone call, or you can send a letter or make a response on their website or something like that. I think we all can kind of just push until things happen.
And I do think, yes, there's the combination of using the services, the structures that exist and working maybe within them, but kind of exploiting them at times to get what we need, and then creating new ones. And I know, Karen, you had something to say to that, or maybe not to that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I just was going to say that, you know, there are some agencies and people in sort of, again, what I would describe sort of more traditional aging models of care who do want to do the right thing and who do want to serve more people. And sometimes the financial models are set up to incentivize people to serve more people, which is good. It never hurts when the heart incentives and the wallet incentives line up. Never hurts. And we actually have partnered with an organization in San Francisco called Unlock, who helped develop the PACE model, which is a national model of care. 38 states, you can go find your PACE provider. And PACE is all about serving as many people as you can in the best way you can. And so we've partnered with them and it formed a really deep partnership where we're going to open one of the country's first social day programs specifically designed for and with LGBTQ seniors that will also end up being a part of their PACE program, right? And so, but in order for us to agree to that partnership, we asked of them to essentially open up every part of what they do, right? We looked at the way they hire people, we looked at the way their electronic health systems work, the whole. And so I just want to shout out to them because not very many people or organizations have the humility to say, we really want to do this, take a look, and know that we're going to come back and be like, eesh, some things need to change. But we're also coming at it from a place of like, you help us do this and you're going to lead the way, right? Because then those PACE providers in the other 38 states, we're going to look at them at national PACE and we're going to be like, get it together, get your shit together, because we're doing it. And I think there needs to be some, again, leaders who have national recognition across the country who really are willing to break what they do a little bit, to try different ways, and then really inspire folks to come around. And I don't know, even 3 years ago, I might've said that's not possible, but I feel like there's some hope around that. And then the last thing I'll say as a identified hashtag data nerd is every city and state really needs to pass laws and legislation that require providers of aging services to collect sexual orientation and gender identity data. There's been some work at this at the national level too that's stalled out, but if you're not collecting that data, it keeps us invisible. Because then people can say, oh yeah, we serve plenty of LGBTQ people. I don't know what you're talking about. I saw a gay guy the other day. It's like, okay, good. That data is what in San Francisco has allowed us to say, hey, y'all think that everybody queer is getting served, and the data shows you that is not the case right here in San Francisco. So like, that's just a national and local, your city can pass legislation like that, your state can pass legislation. Once you have the data, then you can make the case to say you are not serving us and it's not okay. And that's sounds like a boring data thing, but is a hugely important advocacy tool that can really start to make a difference.
Absolutely. And the lack of data is the data, right? It shows the invisibility that we've been talking about, and that invisibility is reinforced. So I'm hearing folks say, we need to build housing, and, building LGBT affirming collective housing is something all of us have been doing work around, but we're not going to build our way out of the need. So we also need to be training and providing education for the agencies that do exist, and then creating new structures and communities and agencies through advocacy that are better. So one thing I would like to think about too, is we talk about the needs of people around housing, diving a little deeper, what's happening inside housing, right? Whether someone is aging in place and is isolated, as we've been talking about, or they're in an LGBT affirming or just an affordable housing space, what's going on for folks mentally as they age? And how does that relate to people dying with dignity and grace and care? And I might start with Karen, because this is something we talk about a lot, is like building it is not enough. So what is happening for people in the spaces, and how do we address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's amazing that we now have, what are we up to? Sydney, you're the guru holding all the numbers here, but how many, 30, 40 LGBTQ welcoming?
It's in the range. I'll check my numbers while I'm on mute.
See, I put Sydney right on the spot. She's never going to forget. We now have LGBTQ welcoming housing, right, in multiple places across the country. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
And if we don't have models of care to help support people age in place, what a disaster for us to build homes that people are going to have to leave. And so I just, a lot of the models have been very, they're driven by the local LGBT center, which are awesome, incredible places doing incredible work, who often lack aging experience or any knowledge of senior models. So how do we help the LGBT centers, who become the provider de facto in a lot of these places, to understand seniors more? And again, try to figure out, are there motivated aging service providers that we can invite in? Because the truth is that if we build the housing and we don't put models around it, particularly for people who are isolated, particularly for people who don't have social support, then we're potentially finding ourselves with people not getting to age in this place that they probably helped advocate to build and were a part of making happen. And so I just think that that's really key, because again, most of us want a death at home, surrounded, whatever that means, surrounded by people we love, surrounded by the community that cares about us, right? Like that is how many of us picture our lives ending, and the peace and the joy that we want to have in community. And without models up to that point, it's a model that unfortunately is more likely to be in a hospital, which again, hospitals are also not places that are necessarily providing great senior or LGBTQ affirming care. But I'm sure Amani and Jacqueline have way smarter things to say about that than me. So.
Dr. Amani or Jacqueline?
Not way smarter. not at all. Oh, I was just listening to you, Karen, and you really covered the whole thing. I could just, add on to that. You really kind of covered it. We cannot build ourselves out of this stuff. We cannot. In Washington, D.C., one of the things they've done is that it's mandated that all health professionals have to take X amount of hours of LGBTQ SGL cultural competency. And they have to do this on a recurring basis. They don't just do one and done, which is awesome, right? But it's not enough. It's not enough, but it is something, right? And so Mary's House for Older Adults, we want to build, our first one will be this communal living. I really am a proponent of communal living, which means that that somebody's going to say, "Hi, Miss Sydney, how are you this morning?" Somebody's going to knock on your door and say that, as opposed to it doesn't mean that you have to come out and talk or interact. But we have to look in your eyes, as my pop would say, right? Look, let me look in your eyes to see how you're doing. So we believe in that communal model, and we want to build one in every city. So we're looking every state. So we're looking at that, and I just want to just restate that we have to get the agencies that are involved, the nursing homes, the retirement homes, all of those. We have to make them better. They have to become culturally competent, right? And Karen, you said the right thing, not just on LGBTQ, but on ageism. Can you imagine the ageism? I mean, we all around this page know about the ageism that goes on in nursing homes. The baby talk. I remember having to ask someone not to speak to my stepmother in that way, that to refer to her as Mrs. Woody, not baby honey sugar, that all that condescending kind of verbiage, right? That my stepmother thought was condescending. I did too. To have a dignity in speaking to people and respecting people. And Jacqueline, this is right up your alley, so I'm just going to toss this ball to you.
Well, thank you. And I love this group. If you all are enjoying yourselves, please know that we as the panelists are enjoying ourselves just as much. I want to pick up on something that Karen said, which is actually our LGBTQ organizations have a huge opportunity to do more to see seniors, to see what aging really looks like, and to meet people in their homes. I think that's the biggest oversight that I see LGBTQ orgs dealing with, because many were started out of the HIV/AIDS crisis. And this idea of aging in some ways is a privilege, but our organizations have a huge opportunity to build those bridges. Instead of saying, okay, you have to come here for your appointment to the LGBTQ medical center, how about we start to do home visits and see seniors in their home, so we know what's actually happening, and building bridges to be able to provide for in-home care and support services so people can age at home. Because what's happening right now in the LGBTQ housing organizations that I'm aware of is that people are staying in independent living as long as possible. And so you have people passing away in independent living because there's not a bridge. There's not a plan that they're comfortable with to transition to assisted living or to transition to long-term skilled care. And that's, for me as a healthcare provider, as a 20-year caregiver, that's unconscionable because you should have dignity in death, right? And there's so much choice that we can actually have when we look at death and dying, and we look at really that fourth quarter of life, right? Not just the Golden Girls, but Sophia's peers and what's happening for the folks older than her. So I just think there's huge opportunity for our communities to really embrace aging, uplift, see our elders, support them, and meet them where they're at. And as both Karen and Dr. Woody said, let's build some bridges, improve these systems for everybody.
And let's not just do it for the seniors. Let's do it because we know that LGBTQ youth are suffering, right? And we know that people of all ages are experiencing isolation. And we know that there are people that if they could really have more access to resilience and someone who cares and is thinking and check, like the intergenerational model is too often described as a one way, like, oh, let's help the senior. And like, meanwhile, it's not like we're not seeing huge struggles for the younger peoples in our community.
Exactly.
And like, how do we, and I haven't figured it out, but like, how do we really make that start to build kind of a community base, right? That's holding people through that experience, because the community's benefiting too. Like, we all lose when someone's dying by themselves, and we all lose when someone's isolated and we're not learning from them. But ageism and our systems, which tend to separate people on all kinds of things, age being one of them, we're sort of working uphill on that.
So I want to add to Karen, what you just said. DC has a model that I'm working with, Aging in Place. We have a program in our city called Aging in Place. So we're working on this model, intergenerational model for older adults who have rooms in their homes, to rent rooms to at-risk youth that are in the place is called Wanda's House, and it houses LGBTQ youth, and we have elders, LGBTQ seniors who need assistance, and so we're trying to put it together. So I'll let Andy, I'll let Sydney is really Sydney. I'll let Sydney know where this is going and how we are. So we're trying to fund it and trying to figure out both of these populations are vulnerable populations, right? So we don't want elders being taken advantage of or the youth being taken advantage of. So we have to have some safety measures there. And we are trying to have a stipend for the youth and a stipend for the elder. And so that everybody is made whole, right? And this is a great model. So we'll see. We're going to pilot it, I hope, by the end of this year. And I'll let you all know what's going on, but I think it does well to put youth and elders together.
I think that's really important. And I know that One Roof Chicago is going to be doing just that, and in housing, but also in services, and looking at the needs of youth and how do we connect cross-generationally, because also hearing the stories and supporting our elders is a part of all of our survival, and it's critically important. And Jacqueline, I don't know if you had something to add to that, but I'll hold off on my next question.
Yeah, just to add that, for those of us who are members of LGBTQ plus communities, that we miss that connection. You kind of get isolated by age at any age, right? There's too few spaces where we can come together as community at different stages in life. And part of, for One Roof, what we're trying to do is, as Dr. Woody is in DC, is pilot something new. And so we're really working hard to figure out how can you have an intergenerational environment that contributes to organic relationships, conversations, and mutual care. And how can we have a workforce development arm that helps train younger LGBTQ folks to care for older adults so that they can have pathways into healthcare or into senior services, because we know there's a caregiving shortage coming. It's already here. We know that LGBTQ seniors are more comfortable with somebody that shares or is truly culturally affirming around their identity. So, I think we're all in that innovation space. And folks, if you have not been connected to any of our organizations, I encourage you to check us out. Check out Mary's House, check out One Roof, check us all out. There's ways to support and stay connected to this ongoing work.
I want to ask this question because this is coming up a lot in the chat. I apologize, I'm not getting to what everyone's saying. We'll have a little more time for that in a minute. But just, you know, the breadth of life experience and beauty that people make in the world, and then loss and what happens when people slip through the cracks. So I think somebody was talking in our planning session, what is the social currency in LGBTQ communities around death and dying? So who has support in this time, but who is isolated? And what are the ways that we can support people and preserve quality of life? How do we ensure people are not slipping through the cracks? Because what I'm sensing is this fear of slipping through the cracks when that might not have been your experience in other parts of your life. And now that's how it's feeling. So I don't know if folks can talk to the social currency thing, you know, who do we lift up and support and who are we missing? And how do we do better?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here. I think this was a comment that I had made because, you know, in working in death and dying, I know that the superstars in LGBTQ plus community typically have support, right? And they typically have a lot of support. I had a older woman, lesbian identified, got really sick, and she passed away 6 months later. But one of her friends, her closest friend that was her power of attorney, I had to coach her to say no to people because there were so many people in this woman's life who wanted to be at the bedside, who wanted to come have a visit, say their last word, offer something. And when you're dying, you really typically just want your close people around you, right? It's intimate spiritual space if you're lucky enough to have a death that is more planful. So, you know, our superstars get a lot of attention, and sometimes that can be overwhelming, and some of it's helpful, some of it's not. But for the vast majority of LGBTQ seniors, it's social isolation, it's a pretty lonely journey. And at the Out Aging Summit that happened a few years ago here in Chicago, people identified they need guidance and navigation. They need advocacy and somebody to help them navigate these systems and make those critical decisions, identify that power of attorney before, you know, memory or your capacity changes. So just to say, we do have an issue with social currency, and there's no safety net for folks that kind of aren't in that well-known, well-regarded superstar range, from my perspective. Karen and Dr. Woody, what do you two think?
I mean, obviously I agree with you because, you know, how would I come and disagree with you now towards the end of this? But no, I agree with you. And I want to say, you know, there's ways in which we as humans, we want to show up for the last moment and to say goodbye. And we sometimes don't do such a great job showing up along the journey. And especially the superstars in the community, right? Everyone's getting ready to like post their, I went and was there in the last moment. And this, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to say goodbye. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be there at the end. And I just would challenge everyone, like, you know, hanging out with someone who has mild dementia and going to a primary care visit might be actually a much more meaningful, heroic moment for you with them than the bedside moment where often the person may not even be aware that you're there, right? So like, I sometimes worry that we, you know, death is so powerful and pulls us together in a particular way that we sometimes, there's something that sometimes it's considered kind of, I'm going to use the word sexier, but I don't exactly mean that, flashier, more interesting, easier to talk about than like, what does it just mean to be with somebody who's experiencing cognitive impairment or getting more frail or needs some rides, and like, how do we energize and envision ourselves as community showing up to do that, and how do we make that kind of showing up have currency as well, because it doesn't tend to. And you're right, and people who have gone through a slower decline also all may do things that push people away, and they're not the superstars, are not there, and so the end doesn't look like what we want. So how do we start to think about showing up for each other earlier would be just something I would hope we'd take away from tonight.
And thanks, Karen and Jacqueline. I'm just thinking about what you're saying. I'm thinking, I was in Rehoboth this past weekend, and you all are a little younger than I am, but there used to be these lesbian parties that used to happen all the time, right? And they were put on by the Women's Center, and lesbians kind of just took them over, and it just organically happened. And so I was at a restaurant, and this woman was singing, who was a lesbian. And so she had a following. And so it just turned at the restaurant into this big lesbian following. And these are older women, right? And so there were some, that happened organically. I was the only Black person there, right? Black older lesbian there. And I was saying, my partner stayed home, and I was saying to my wife, I said, the only thing that would have made it perfect would have been if it had been some more people of color there. But I was in a spot, I was in Rehoboth, which is basically white, some pockets of people of color. And so I just want to add to this mix when we talk about LGBTQ, to add that person of color, Black people in particular, kind of thing. I got this weird vibe from the waitress, and I was saying, God, does she not like lesbians? I said, no, that can't be it, because all these lesbians, they're here and she's having fun. And she gave me this kind of look that I took to mean that she wasn't terribly willing to wait on me or whatever. But you can't, that's something you can't quantify, right? But you know it when you feel it. And so when we talk about social isolation and being alone, we can be alone with I could have felt alone. I had these friends were dear, so I didn't. But one could have felt alone in a place where you don't see yourself. So we have to, when we say these things, we have to include not only LGBTQ, SGL plus, we have to include people of color. And I know this group you do, but I'm talking to other folks that we have to, make a concerted effort that Black Lives Matter. That's concerted. People of color, yes, matter also, but Black Lives Matter. And as we can see in our country, like 50% or 49% of the country may not think so. So.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, and let's get rid of you have to be a certain age to be a senior, which disproportionately decides that people of color and trans people are going to not be included because they're facing barriers that mean they don't get to age as long. Like, people get to be a senior when they have fucking earned it. And some people have had experiences. I mean, the trans women that we work with are like, we consider seniors to be 30. Now that's not okay, guys. We shouldn't all sit around and be like, yay, we have to fight to change that. But that's right. Senior is an earned title that has to do with who you experience in the world. And that's another barrier, right? You have to be 65 to qualify. You have to be 60. Our housing, we fought with the city, 62. It's like you are reenacting the inequities that you're saying, making different by deciding this is the age that you're senior. And breaking that up anyway would have positive effects beyond that. And that prevents us of telling the stories of LGBTQ seniors who are people of color and who are trans and who are both, because we set it up to have a certain picture and image of what it means to be senior. So, yeah.
And thanks, Karen, that trickles down into some research. My research included that, gay men at 30, they think they are old, right? Gay women, lesbians usually at 45. But
whoa,
and they act.
Take it easy. Take it easy.
See what I'm saying? My point. That so it trickles down in our societal thinking, right? That and it's awful. I was trying to help a person rent a house rent a room in a house, and the gay guy said to me, asked me how old the person was. The person was 67. He said, no, I don't want no old sissy living in my house, right? So this is within the community. The community, look at John, the community is, we're like that. So we got to change that picture.
Mhm. Can I just say a word here? Because I feel like we're kind of around it, but I just want to uplift that some of what we're talking about here is intersectionality and the ways that other identities come into play as we age, not just being LGBTQ plus. And so whether we're talking about the ways that aging as a Black person or a brown person or a Native American person can isolate you further, there's also things like class that really come into play as we're aging and take away choice. So, for me, my two gay white male clients that worked as attorneys and live on the Gold Coast in Chicago have wider networks of access and support and more money to get into higher quality care than my trans female client who is that 40-year-old whose body and mind tell the story of what has happened to her and who hasn't been able to be stably housed and who doesn't have access to much income. Those experiences are vastly different. And I hope that our movement, as we continue to seek these resources, really takes an intersectional approach, because that's the world we're living in. And if we're all going to rise together, it's going to take seeing the people even at the margins of our own community.
Thank you so much for that. That is absolutely spot on and speaks to, so much of what we see in the lack of accessible, affordable housing, in the ways that people interact with medical care systems. And, there's questions here in the chat. I'm going to open it up to the audience in a minute. But elder care is expensive. So thinking about socioeconomics and the intersections of racism and how that shows up in, Dr. Amani started the conversation with that personal experience, right? With your parents. So, elder care is expensive. I see it with, my parents. My mom won't stop working because Medicare is not going to cover what my dad needs for his health. So can anyone speak to the financing piece? How do you take care of someone that needs 24/7 care? How do you access resources? I don't know if we have all those answers because a lot of it's inaccessible. But the socioeconomic piece and the access piece, does anyone have any other thoughts around that kind of deep fear of being able to access the medical care you need?
I have one thought. If one can afford it, get long-term care insurance. That's my one thought. I could not afford it, and I put pennies away so that I have it. That's one thing that because Medicare won't pay for, as Jacqueline said, won't pay for a lot.
I think there's some good advocacy opportunities. It doesn't help anybody today seeking services, but programs like PACE, which I mentioned earlier, moving away from being Medicare, Medi-Cal only programs, which it should continue to be, but instead that it becomes a Medicare also option that people can access, because it ends up saving money because it's thinking about risk and providing proactive care. But some of the models that we have that are designed either for a private pay audience or for those who are Medicare, Medi-Cal are actually pretty good models and actually provide pretty good aging care. They're just only serving right now the tiniest bit of people because of how strict the requirements are, because of the payer streams. And I do think there's opportunities to take models like that, especially if we can get our federal stuff worked out around Medicare for all and other stuff. I won't go there right now, but that would let you expand those models in ways that they could become more of the kind of what you could expect as you age, regardless of income level, rather than being as restricted as they are now. That's more of an advocacy piece, but it's a really important one.
Yeah. So I'm going to take off my One Roof hat and put on my care plan hat, because my company, the Care Plan, is designed to support care planning and care management for LGBTQ folks we work on sliding scale, and we work nationally. So if people, because I know a lot of people are here sort of talking about personal experience in the chat, if you need local resources, reach out to us. There's a lot out there, but you still, there's a lot out there, but to age at home with the level of support you need is always going to be a challenge because Medicaid does not cover round the clock care. So there's always a gap. I do have clients that some of whom have utilized long-term care insurance, but if you're on a fixed income or living closer to the poverty level or don't have excess funds, there in some cities there are subsidized caregiver services. There's veterans benefits that have been just a lifesaver for many of my clients, and we know LGBTQ people serve at a higher percentage than non-LGBTQ and SGL folks. So, you know, it's really, from my mind, it's pretty personal because it tends to be a mix of what can we get covered, where can we maybe get your chosen family involved or have a share the care model with yourself and other friends or with somebody living in your home or you living in someone else's home. So we know, especially in Black communities, like it is home-based care and we try to figure out how to keep people out of nursing homes. So, you know, it tends to be like, let's put your plan together, see what's available in your area and make sure that we can achieve your goals and make you aware of any risks that you may be taking, right? I had a client call the other day who said, she's like, I just want to die at home. I was like, that's possible. There's going to be a line where that approaches self-neglect. And we need to be really, really careful about that line because the state isn't going to cover the round-the-clock care. We need to get some supplemental support so that you can stay at home and can pass away with hospice care, but in a safe way. And if folks need clarification, let me know. I'm going to put my email in the chat for anybody that on a personal level wants to have those questions answered.
Thank you so much. So I've been trying to see what's happening in the chat. There's a lot of good questions here. I think we're going to open it up a little bit. Is there someone who has a question that we haven't answered? Maybe John, around well-resourced organizations and how we can support this work more?
I just want to thank the panelists. I'm listening and it's like, particularly Jackie and Dr. Amani, it's like, it's so visceral what you're saying because as a Black cisgender loving man who's aging, I'm thinking a lot about what's the next step for me. What should I be doing now to prepare for 20 years? Sorry about that. 20 years down the road. Like, should I be squirreling my pennies away for a insurance policy like Dr. Mani was saying, or should like what should I be doing? I guess I live in New York City. I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and here we have SAGE, which is like a big national, international senior LGBT organization that's like the model for the world in terms of care. And I have utilized their services several times, but I'm wondering now I need to go back. Well, they're closed now because of COVID. So do I need to contact someone to find out, like, okay, I have a living will, I have all of those legal documents in place, but now what do I need to do for my like long-term health care services? So I'm just so mesmerized by listening to the conversation. So I guess my question would be like I was like Ms. Boyd, I was going to contact you. You said you're going to put your email address in the chat, and I was going to send you a message about like what are the steps, what are the procedures that I should be thinking about taking to prepare for the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being the first to speak up and to share where your head is at and where your heart is at on this. And SAGE has wonderful resources. In particular, they have a lot of guides that can walk you through sort of your own planning process. I'm going to try to go off video and find one that I can put in the chat. But I have a roadmap to successful aging that I'm happy to share again with anybody here. My contact info is in there, and it's just an 8-page document that kind of talks you through the typical aging process and what to be thinking about at every stage, including retirement, chronic illness, end of life, et cetera, and how to plan ahead for that. So happy to support, and I know all of us can be a resource for anybody here.
I will also put my contact info in there because I am with Sage. Actually, I'm not a care manager, but I can, if you have questions and also just more direct care questions, you can feel free to contact me and I can connect you to folks as well.
Are you at Sage New York or?
I do national work, but I'm sitting here in Brooklyn.
And Mary's House for Older Adults, we have health and wellness series. We just had one today on advanced directives. We've had them on cluttering, just kind of basic practical kinds of tips. So I'd love to use, I'll put my email in the chat as well for anyone who wants to reach out to me.
Oh,
And I'm
you.
proud of you for having all your documents, man. How cool is that?
Yeah, I just want to say,
Exactly what I was going to say.
I have read about your work in DC, and it's wonderful. It's just, I've been reading about it over the years, particularly recently, and it's just great. Congratulations on the, I was going to say yeoman, but that's gender.
Yeah, that's a real word, man. I'll take it.
But I don't want to say yeoman, but your woman's effort. It's great. Thank you so much for all that you've done in DC.
Thank you.
I want to ask Annie. I think Annie had a question, and then maybe Oscar.
Hey, we're in trouble out here, and I'm tired of going to funerals of the toughest butchers in New York who ended up alone after they caregave and after they created the culture. When we all got, I don't know what my question is. I don't know. We talk, here's the question we ask each other is, how can we live together? How can we support each other? We're all alone, and what can we do? And Dr. Imani, I don't know if you knew Timothy Howard in DC. I imagine you did. I was with.
I don't know. I'm not good with names anymore, Annie. So I might know the face.
Yeah. Just, I don't know what my question is. John, I hear you. Is that a parking meter behind you? I have one too, John.
It's a bank. It's a piggy bank. That's in a form of a parking meter.
Love you, John. I'd love to be friends with you. So I have surgery in 10 days and, no caregiver, I'm immunocompromised. So really no one could come in, like a visiting nurse or even my sister or my ex. But it's like all of a sudden, yes, I can make my niece my health proxy and the rest. But all of a sudden, it's like I have to take care of myself after surgery alone. It's so frightening, just very frightening. And again, I took care of my mother, my grandmother, my father, community, and we got gentrified out of community. And I'm just so grateful to all the initiatives you've all started, because I don't know what to say. Many of us we were scattered into our own diaspora. We used to live in community and we got gentrified out to different states. And when we lost our housing, the fabric was really torn apart. And so we went to our senator, who's now running for, we went to he was our state senator, Eric Adams. Now he's running for mayor. And he said, go look for buildings. If you find empty buildings, come back to me and I'll see if New York State owns any. And that was a beautiful thing. He was willing to help. But we were all too poor and sick to start walking around the streets like taking addresses of vacant buildings. Anyway, pray for me with my surgery, please. I'll be at Sloan Kettering. And we were all just in a lot of pain. So thank you. Please, to the panelists, can you put your social media tags, like if you're on Instagram or Twitter? Because this way we could follow all your initiatives. And thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Andy, for setting this up, and everybody.
Thank you so much, Annie. I don't know if anyone has anything they want to say.
Well, I do. Annie, I think you're brave, girl. I remember us living together and housing and the gentrification that is happening to a lot of us. So we are pioneers. I used to hate that word, right? Because I'm saying, who are you talking about? But they're talking about us, right? We're pioneers, and I will hold you in the light. I'm just thinking here how we can help right now, but with your immune system, I was going to say maybe you can pull together an angels network, that somebody comes in on Monday, somebody comes in on Tuesday, somebody comes in on Wednesday. But wear masks, put those things on your feet, shoes, like you were hunkering down for COVID invasion, right? And let some folks come in that way, if that can help, to bring you a meal, put, just kind of set that up, or maybe one of your friends can make the calls for you, right? And then this person comes at 1 o'clock on Tuesday or whatever. That's the short part. I'm just thinking about this, that you don't need to be just coming from the hospital by yourself. So think about it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and Annie, I just want to also offer encouragement, and you are obviously incredibly resilient and powerful, and so that's going to support you and carry you through on the surgery. Please do reach out if you want to brainstorm around some of this, and be sure that you have at least some support, because surgery is really intense for the body, and so your job after surgery should only be to heal. And if we can help support that happening, we're here with you. The guide that I put in the chat is available through Sage. And I would say take a look at it, because it's specifically, I authored it. It's specifically about how to prepare for a medical procedure and pull that care team together. So here to support. We're all holding you in the light and hopeful that everything goes smoothly. Thank you.
And I want to second the motion that Jacqueline Boyd is the best freaking resource. When I came out of surgery, I called her. So just so you know.
I'll third that. The best.
Yep.
Sent people to her from all over the country in situations like yours and others, Annie, and it's made a huge difference. Oh, we'll be thinking about you.
Sending you lots of love, Annie, and we have some info in the chat, but also I know that Andy will be sending out some information for folks for follow-up. I think that we have time for one more question if we have Oscar.
Hi, thanks. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I just want to voice just a frustration that I've had. I just turned 59. I'm a long-term survivor. I've been HIV positive since 1985. And one of the biggest frustrations, whether it's here in Portland or even in other cities, is that, or I think the comment that I need to make is that we need to find a way to make these programs work for all those intersectionalities that we were talking about earlier, because the frustration that I've had is both with long-term survivors, support groups or support organizations, and locally with SAGE, is that they assume that you're no longer working, and if they have an event to help you or to support you or to help you, teach people about some of the legal things they got to do, they can have it at 10 a.m. in the morning, and everyone who needs to go can go. And that's it. That's, I mean, even with a local AIDS organization, and I've experienced this in other cities as well, support groups for long-term survivors, you know, legal information workshops, all between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. It's like, who, you know, how, you know, are you going to reach the people that in some instances need this information the worst? You know, just because I am a long-term survivor does not mean I'm on disability. Even if I could be on disability, I actually was. I couldn't afford to be, so I went back to work. So, you know, we need to find a way to have that discussion across organizations and across groups to say you need to start looking at the intersectionality of who you serve and who you can serve. And we need to find maybe ways of finding the way to support those organizations so that they can have living wages for the people who work for them, or a way to have employees that is hang around long enough to not just make it a stepping stone on their resume to say I work for CAP or I work for Sage, and you know they're there a year and then they're gone, and there's no fluidity, there's no long-term way of doing things. It's just, you know, I'm here for a year, I'm gone. There's
no continuity.
Continuity, thank you. That's what I was trying to find. You know, and it changes everything, especially at the levels of directors. We've got to find a way to stop making those higher level positions. Again, a check mark that someone can have on their resume so that they can go on to bigger and better political things locally or nationally with national organizations. It's like find a way to have people make a longer term commitment to those organizations and the people that they serve, and actually bond and have a community with the people that they serve locally and or nationally. And you know, that's the comment that I want to make, because I have been so frustrated at the fact, you know, that I don't fit that mostly white Anglo upper middle class or high, you know, with a very fluid income system that can show up at any time of the day. You know, the reason I came to this is because I'm completely worried. I'm turning 59. I didn't think I would live this long. Obviously, I did not make the right decisions in my, you know, in the last 4 decades to plan for retirement, to plan for living to be this old. And the older I get, the more worried I get about how my health might turn. And like you said earlier, you know, there are those of us who don't have family, who don't even, because of the gentrification that's happened in our communities, we're not even able to choose families because no one sticks around anymore. Everybody moves around so much. And now, you know, after a certain age, you become separate from even your own community because of the ageism.
Oscar, we hear your anxiety, your frustration. I want to thank you for sharing. I also want to thank John and Annie for your wisdom as well. I especially want to thank our speakers, Sydney, Dr. Imani, Jacqueline, Karen. This was a wonderful way to kick off this series. I'm so grateful to you. I do want to quickly, before you guys all go, Karen was talking about being a data nerd. We're also data nerds here at Reimagine. This is the second poll that I'm going to launch. This helps us. This helps us a lot. I'm launching this. If you guys could fill this out while we're chatting. And Zubin, let's go to the slides now while we're polling here. Yes, I want you to check out next week's Table Talk. This one is going to be another beautiful one. De Ambiente, Grief, Faith, and the LGBTQ plus Boricua diaspora. And then the following week, we have House Ballroom. So please join us again, and please share the video when I send it out to you in a couple of days, and encourage folks to come to the next ones. Also, yeah, contact me, anyone on the Reimagine team about getting involved and hosting an event. I think that's it. Any final words from our speakers?
Thank you, Andy. This was awesome. Thanks to the panelists. Andy, you were delightful, and the folks that attended. I'm really glad we did this and Reimagine thought of it. I'm happy about that.
Thank you, Dr. Imani. I'm wishing everyone a good night, and I hope to see you next week. Take care, everyone.